There are moments when a single decision ripples through history in ways nobody anticipates. What I'm about to reveal about Pete Hegseth's strike order will shock you. Not because of what happened in those Caribbean waters, but because of what's happening right now, months later, in ways that could reshape American foreign policy forever. The 87 people killed in those missile strikes, that was just the beginning. The real story is what those deaths unleashed, a cascade of consequences that Hegseth and his team never saw coming. And I've got sources inside the Pentagon, the State Department, and foreign intelligence services telling me things that should terrify anyone who cares about America's standing in the world. Let me start with what happened 3 days after the last strike, a phone call that changed everything. The caller, the head of Colombia's intelligence service. The message? We know what you really hid out there, and it wasn't just drug boats. That phone call started a chain reaction that's still unfolding today, threatening to expose operations that go far beyond what the public has been told. But here's the part that should keep you awake at night. According to my sources, at least 3 of the boats targeted weren't carrying drugs at all. They were carrying something far more sensitive, something that explains why foreign governments are now quietly threatening to release classified information that could embarrass the United States for decades to come. The first boat hit on September 8th near Trinidad was carrying 2 former CIA contractors who'd been working a completely separate operation. The second boat, destroyed 4 days later, had Venezuelan intelligence assets who were providing information about Chinese military activities in the region. The third, that boat was carrying evidence of corruption involving American officials that multiple governments had been investigating. None of this was in the intelligence briefings that justified the strikes. None of this was mentioned in the congressional testimonies. And none of this has been acknowledged by the current administration. But the consequences? They're piling up every single day. Here's what I know from speaking with former colleagues in the intelligence community. The strikes have created what they call a trust collapse with key allies throughout Latin America. Countries that have been sharing critical intelligence with the United States for decades are now cutting off cooperation. Drug interdiction efforts that depend on international collaboration are falling apart. The Colombian government, which has been America's closest ally in fighting drug trafficking, is now openly questioning whether they can continue security cooperation with the United States. According to diplomatic sources, President Petro told American officials privately that his government can't be seen as supporting extrajudicial killings, regardless of the targets. But the diplomatic crisis is just one layer of this disaster. The legal consequences are even more frightening. I've learned that international criminal court prosecutors are actively building cases based on the strike footage and classified documents that somehow found their way to The Hague. 3 European allies have quietly informed the State Department that they may be legally obligated to restrict cooperation with certain American military officials. What Hegseth didn't understand when he authorized those strikes is that modern warfare doesn't happen in isolation. Every missile fired, every life taken, every decision made creates digital footprints, witness accounts, and evidence trails that follow you forever. And those trails are now being followed by people with the resources and motivation to seek accountability. The Pentagon sources I've spoken with describe the mood inside military leadership as apocalyptic. Career officers who dedicated their lives to building America's reputation for professional, legal military operations are watching decades of work destroyed by what they view as reckless political grandstanding. One 3-star general told me confidentially that recruitment is already being impacted. Young Americans who might have considered military service are now asking recruiters whether they'll be ordered to carry out illegal killings. Military families are questioning whether the chain of command can be trusted to protect service members from war crimes prosecutions. The psychological impact on the troops who carried out these strikes is devastating. According to sources at Walter Reed Medical Center, several personnel involved in the operations have sought counseling for what military psychologists are calling moral injury, the trauma that occurs when you're ordered to do something that violates your ethical beliefs. These aren't just statistics or abstract policy concerns. These are real Americans, real service members who signed up to defend their country legally and honorably, now struggling with the knowledge that they may have participated in war crimes at the direct order of their superiors. The intelligence community is experiencing its own crisis of confidence. CIA and NSA analysts who provided targeting information for the strikes are now discovering that their intelligence was either incomplete or deliberately misrepresented to justify justify operations that may have violated international law. According to sources within the intelligence community, several analysts have filed formal complaints alleging that their assessments were selectively edited to remove information that would have contradicted the administration's narrative about the targets being drug traffickers and terrorists. This has created what intelligence professionals call a reporting crisis, when analysts become afraid to provide honest assessments because they fear their work will be misused to justify illegal actions. If analysts can't trust that their intelligence will be used legally and ethically, the entire system begins to break down. The international ramifications extend far beyond Latin America. According to diplomatic sources, Chinese and Russian intelligence services are actively exploiting the Caribbean strikes to undermine American credibility in other regions. They're telling potential allies that the United States can't be trusted to follow its own laws, much less international agreements. In Africa, where the United States has been competing with China for influence, several governments have quietly indicated that the Caribbean strikes have made American security partnerships politically impossible. How do you explain to your citizens that you're partnering with a country that fires missiles at boats without due process? European allies are facing their own political pressures. Parliamentary opposition parties in multiple NATO countries are demanding explanations for why their governments continue military cooperation with American forces that may have committed war crimes. These aren't just diplomatic protests, they're creating real political vulnerabilities for pro-American governments. The economic consequences are starting to emerge as well. According to sources in the shipping industry, insurance costs for vessels operating in Caribbean waters have increased dramatically due to what insurers are calling American military risk. International shipping companies are quietly rerouting cargo to avoid areas where they fear American forces might engage in unilateral military action. Financial intelligence sharing, which has been crucial for tracking drug money and terrorist financing, is also being impacted. Several Caribbean banking jurisdictions have indicated they're reviewing their cooperation agreements with American financial intelligence agencies due to concerns about how intelligence might be used to justify military strikes. The legal vulnerability for American officials is expanding every day. According to sources familiar with international law enforcement, several countries have opened preliminary inquiries into whether their universal jurisdiction laws require them to investigate American officials involved in the strikes. This means American military and political leaders could potentially face arrest if they travel to certain countries. Former military lawyers are warning that the precedent set by these strikes could be used to justify similar actions by other countries. If the United States can fire missiles at boats suspected of criminal activity without judicial oversight, what stops other nations from doing the same thing to American vessels they suspect of wrongdoing? The congressional oversight that was supposed to provide accountability has itself become part of the problem. According to sources on Capitol Hill, classified briefings about the strikes contained significant omissions and misrepresentations that are only now being discovered as more information emerges. Several members of Congress who initially supported the strikes are now privately expressing regret and anger at having been misled. There are quiet discussions about whether perjury charges could be brought against officials who provided false or incomplete testimony during classified briefings. The media coverage has also revealed troubling aspects of how the strikes were sold to the public. According to journalism sources, administration officials provided selective information to friendly media outlets while withholding crucial details that would have changed the narrative significantly. The administration's response to these mounting consequences has been to double down on secrecy and deflection. Rather than acknowledging problems and working to rebuild trust, officials are classifying more information and restricting access to documents that might reveal the full scope of what went wrong. This approach is making the crisis worse rather than better. International allies who might have been willing to work quietly to resolve issues are instead becoming more public in their criticisms as they realize the administration has no intention of acknowledging or addressing legitimate concerns. Looking ahead, the consequences of Hegseth's strike order are likely to compound rather than diminish. Legal cases take years to develop, but when they finally reach courts, they could result in criminal charges, massive civil settlements, and precedents that limit American military options for decades. The diplomatic damage will take even longer to repair. Trust between nations, once broken, can take generations to rebuild. The message sent by these strikes, that America will kill first and ask questions later, is one that will echo in foreign capitals long after the current administration is gone. Perhaps most tragically, the real victims of the drug trade that these strikes were supposedly targeting are no closer to receiving effective help. International cooperation that actually stops drug trafficking has been damaged, while the dramatic but ultimately counterproductive military action has achieved nothing except creating new enemies and new problems. The unseen consequences of Hegseth's strike order continue to unfold every day. What seemed like decisive action in the moment has become an ongoing disaster that threatens American interests, American values, and American credibility around the world. The price of those 87 lives keeps growing, and we're all going to be paying it for years to come.